When the hackers breached Sterling Corporation's classified defense contracts at 3 a.m., everyone panicked. The CEO called emergency meetings, the IT department ran in circles, and million-dollar deals hung in the balance. But Margaret Chen, the quiet secretary who'd served coffee and filed papers for 12 years, calmly walked to her desk and began typing commands that would shock everyone in the boardroom. The alarm pierced the pre-dawn silence of Sterling Corporation's 40th floor like a knife through glass. Emergency lights bathed the executive suite in harsh red as security protocols locked down the building. Within minutes, the elevator disgorged a stream of panicked executives, disheveled IT specialists, and bleary-eyed security personnel. Margaret Chen arrived 30 minutes before anyone else, as she had every morning for 12 years. While chaos erupted around her, she moved with quiet efficiency to her modest desk outside the executive boardroom, turning on her computer and starting the coffee maker that had become her trademark. "Margaret, thank God you're here," gasped CEO Richard Sterling as he burst from the elevator, his usually perfect hair askew and his shirt hastily buttoned. "We need you to call everyone, board members, legal, our Pentagon contacts. This is a disaster." Margaret nodded calmly, already reaching for her phone. "How many confirmed breaches, Mr. Sterling?" "They got into the Blackwater defense contracts, the satellite communication protocols, maybe more. We're talking about classified information that could compromise national security." Sterling's voice cracked with stress. "If this gets out, we're finished." As executives flooded the conference room for the emergency meeting, Margaret performed her usual ritual, preparing coffee, distributing notepads, ensuring everyone had what they needed. To the panicked men and women strategizing damage control, she was invisible, a fixture as familiar and unremarkable as the mahogany furniture. But while they argued and pointed fingers, Margaret was listening. More than listening, she was analyzing, cataloging, processing information with skills honed over decades in environments where missing a detail could cost lives. The IT director, sweating through his polo shirt, stood before a wall of monitors displaying the hack's devastation. The infiltration started at 3:17 a.m. They bypassed our firewalls like they weren't even there, went straight for the classified servers. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. Margaret's fingers paused over her keyboard. The timing was interesting. 3:17 a.m. fell perfectly between shift changes for Sterling's night security. The hackers had done their homework. "Can we trace the source?" demanded CFO Patricia Walsh. "They're using advanced masking techniques, routing through multiple proxy servers. This isn't some script kiddie operation. These are professionals." Margaret continued typing, but her mind was elsewhere, running scenarios and probabilities like she'd been trained to do at Langley. Professional hackers with specific intelligence about Sterling security protocols and shift schedules. Inside knowledge of classified contract locations. Surgical precision in target selection. This wasn't a random cyber crime. This was espionage. "Mr. Sterling," the IT director continued, "I have to be honest, we're in over our heads. We need to call in federal cybersecurity specialists, maybe the FBI." "Absolutely not," Sterling snapped. "The moment we involve the feds, this becomes public. Our stock price will crater, we'll lose every government contract we have." Margaret had heard this song before. 12 years of serving coffee and filing papers had taught her that corporate executives would always choose damage control over damage prevention. It was human nature, protect the immediate reputation while ignoring the underlying threat. But as the meeting dragged on with no solutions, only escalating panic, Margaret found herself growing frustrated. She'd spent 15 years at the CIA preventing exactly these kinds of disasters. She'd tracked international espionage rings, uncovered foreign intelligence operations, protected American assets that these same executives now saw crumbling before their eyes. When the IT team announced they'd lost access to another classified server, Margaret made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," she said quietly, standing in the doorway of the conference room. The room fell silent. In 12 years, Margaret had never interrupted an executive meeting. Mr. Sterling, I believe I can help with your cybersecurity situation. Sterling blinked in confusion. Margaret, we appreciate the thought, but this is a technical issue. I understand that, sir, but I think I might have some relevant experience. The IT director stifled what might have been a laugh. Ma'am, no offense, but we're dealing with state-of-the-art hacking techniques. This isn't about organizing files or scheduling meetings. Margaret walked calmly to the nearest computer terminal, her fingers already moving across the keyboard with a fluidity that made several executives lean forward in their chairs. The initial breach came through your VPN gateway, she said without looking up. Lines of code scrolling across the screen. They exploited a zero-day vulnerability in your authentication protocol. Very sophisticated, but they left traces. The room went dead silent, except for the rapid clicking of Margaret's keystrokes.
The attack pattern suggests a 3-stage operation,
She continued, pulling up diagnostic screens none of them had seen before.
Stage 1 was reconnaissance, mapping your network architecture over several weeks. Stage 2 was the actual infiltration. Stage 3, which they're executing now, is data exfiltration.
How could you possibly know that?
Whispered Patricia Walsh. Margaret's fingers never stopped moving. Because I've seen this exact signature before. Eastern European group, probably Russian-backed, specializing in defense contractor infiltration. They hit Lockheed Martin last year using identical methodology. She pulled up a new window showing real-time network traffic. They're still connected. Right now they're downloading the Jupiter satellite specifications. Sterling stood frozen, watching his secretary, navigate cybersecurity systems with expertise that surpassed his entire IT department. Who are you? He asked quietly. Margaret paused for just a moment, her hands still poised over the keyboard. For 12 years, she'd been Margaret Chen, executive secretary, invisible and unremarkable. Before that, she'd been intelligence analyst Margaret Chen, CIA Operations Division, clearance level Ultra. I'm someone who can stop this, she said simply, then resumed typing. What happened next would be talked about in Sterling Corporation's halls for years to come. Margaret's fingers flew across multiple keyboards as she accessed systems the IT department didn't know existed. She traced the hackers' digital footprints through layers of proxy servers, identified their command and control infrastructure, and began systematically dismantling their operation. She's counter-hacking them, the IT director whispered in amazement. She's actually turning their own tools against them. Within 20 minutes, Margaret had not only stopped the data theft, but had gained access to the hackers' own servers. The room watched in stunned silence as she downloaded gigabytes of intelligence about their operations, their previous targets, their funding sources. There, she said, finally leaning back from the terminal. The breach is sealed, your data is secure, and I've recovered everything they stole. Additionally, I've gathered enough evidence to identify their entire network. The conference room erupted in questions, but Sterling raised his hand for silence. He studied Margaret with new eyes, seeing for the first time the woman who'd been sitting outside his office for over a decade. Margaret, I think we need to have a conversation. An hour later, Sterling's private office held only 3 people. Sterling himself, Margaret, and Patricia Walsh, who served as the company's security oversight officer. Margaret sat calmly in the same chair where she'd received countless mundane instructions over the years. The background check we ran when we hired you, Sterling began, consulting a thin file, shows you worked for various government agencies before joining Sterling, administrative positions mostly. That's correct, Margaret said, but administrative positions don't typically include advanced cybersecurity training or the ability to identify Russian intelligence operations. Margaret considered her words carefully. My previous work required certain specialized skills. Patricia leaned forward. Margaret, what we witnessed today, that wasn't basic computer literacy. You demonstrated expertise that our cybersecurity consultants don't possess. We need to understand what we're dealing with. For 12 years, Margaret had deflected such questions with vague references to government work and administrative duties. She'd built a careful facade of competent but unremarkable efficiency. the perfect invisible employee who knew everyone's schedules and coffee preferences. But the hackers had forced her hand. The moment she'd started typing those commands, her cover had effectively blown itself. "I worked for the Central Intelligence Agency from 1995 to 2010, Margaret said finally. Intelligence Analysis Division, specializing in foreign espionage operations and cybersecurity threats." Sterling's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "You were CIA?" "I was the youngest analyst ever promoted to senior level in the Digital Intelligence Division. I specialized in tracking foreign hackers targeting American defense contractors." "Why didn't you tell us?" Patricia demanded. "We've been paying cybersecurity consultants millions of dollars while you've been sitting right outside our boardroom with this expertise?" Margaret's expression remained calm, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Because I retired from that life for a reason. I came here seeking something different, predictable, quiet, safe." "What happened?" Sterling asked gently. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap. "There was an operation in 2010. We were tracking a Chinese intelligence ring that had infiltrated several defense contractors. I identified the network, traced their operations, built the case that should have shut them down." She paused, looking out the window at the Seattle skyline. "My analysis was rejected by senior management. They said the evidence was insufficient. The diplomatic considerations outweighed security concerns. 3 months later, the same network I'd identified stole the plans for the F-35 fighter jet. Billions in losses, years of compromised national security." Sterling and Patricia exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand why their unassuming secretary had spent 12 years content to file papers and schedule meetings. "I resigned the next day," Margaret continued. "I was tired of politics overriding analysis, of watching preventable disasters unfold because someone decided that perception mattered more than protection." "But you came to work for a defense contractor," Patricia pointed out. Margaret smiled slightly. "I thought it would be different, simpler. Turn out, human nature is consistent regardless of the organization." Sterling stood and walked to his window, processing the revelation that his secretary, was potentially the most qualified intelligence analyst in the building. "Margaret, what you did today saved this company, probably saved several classified defense programs. The question is, what do we do now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we can't pretend this didn't happen. You've demonstrated capabilities that make you incredibly valuable, and potentially incredibly dangerous if you chose to be." Margaret had anticipated this moment for 12 years. The day when her past would collide with her present, when she'd have to choose between the safety of anonymity and the responsibility of using skills that could make a difference. "Mr. Sterling, I've spent 12 years watching this company make the same security mistakes that led to disasters I tried to prevent at the CIA. I've seen classified information discussed in elevators, sensitive documents left on printers, executives use company phones for personal calls while visiting foreign countries." She stood, her posture subtly shifting from subservient employee to confident professional. "If you're asking whether I'll continue to sit quietly while preventable security threats materialize, the answer is no. Not after today." Sterling turned from the window, decision made. "Patricia, I want you to work with Margaret to conduct a complete security audit of our operations. Margaret, consider yourself promoted to Chief Security Officer, effective immediately." "Sir." Your salary will reflect your new responsibilities, and you'll have budget authority to implement whatever security measures you deem necessary. The only condition is that you never again let us operate with vulnerabilities you could have prevented." Margaret looked around the office where she'd served coffee and taken messages for over a decade. The same mahogany desk, the same leather chairs, the same view of Elliott Bay. But everything had changed. "There's one more thing," she said. "The hackers who breached your system today, they weren't working alone. The operation I helped dismantle was just one tentacle of a larger espionage network. Sterling Corporation was specifically targeted because of your new quantum encryption contracts with the Pentagon." Sterling's face went pale. "Are you saying this will happen again?"
I'm saying
It's happening right now, across multiple companies, and today's attack was just the beginning. Margaret moved to the computer terminal, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. But now that I know what we're facing, I can do something about it. Over the following months, Margaret's transformation from invisible secretary to indispensable security chief became the stuff of Sterling Corporation legend. She implemented security protocols that became the gold standard for defense contractors, identified and neutralized 3 additional espionage attempts, and built a cybersecurity team that rivaled government agencies. But perhaps more importantly, she proved that sometimes the most powerful assets are the ones hiding in plain sight. That expertise doesn't always announce itself with credentials and titles, and that the quiet person organizing files might be the only thing standing between your company and catastrophic failure. The hackers who'd forced Margaret out of hiding had given Sterling Corporation something far more valuable than they'd stolen. They'd revealed that their greatest security asset had been sitting outside the boardroom all along, serving coffee and keeping secrets, waiting for the moment when her country and her company needed her most. 6 months later, Margaret received a call from her former supervisor at Langley. "We've been following your work at Sterling," the voice said. "The espionage network you're tracking. We'd like to discuss a joint operation." Margaret smiled as she hung up the phone. Some retirements, she realized, were just intermissions. If you enjoyed this story of hidden expertise and second chances, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become part of our Hidden Truth Stories community. We share powerful tales of ordinary people who prove that the most extraordinary abilities often hide behind the most ordinary facades. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and let us know what state or country you're in. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you knew had incredible hidden talents or a secret past? Share your own stories of unexpected revelations in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it inspired you, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that we all have hidden depths worth discovering. Until next time, keep believing that everyone has a story waiting to be revealed. The end.